Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be doing something a little different.
Oh,
Yeah, we're going to be looking at quail farming.
quail farming.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, I think.
Okay.
So our guide for this deep dive is a 2014 research report
Okay.
from the International Journal of Life Sciences.
Interesting.
It's called Quail Farming, an introduction.
Straight to the point.
Yeah, so whether you've seen maybe like those little quail eggs at the grocery store,
Yeah.
or you're just curious about maybe alternatives to like chicken or turkey, this is going to be the deep dive for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
So,
Let's jump in.
get ready to learn some really interesting facts about these birds.
Okay, so what does this report tell us? Like, where do we even begin?
Yeah, so it actually takes us all the way back to 1595 in Japan.
Wow.
That's where quail were first domesticated.
I had no idea.
And so like here in India,
Yeah.
we've got two different types of quail, right? We've got the black-breasted quail, which is like a wild quail. And then we've got the brown Japanese quail, which is the one that's been domesticated
Okay.
for meat and for eggs.
So when you say domesticated, that means they've been, like, bred and raised specifically for those purposes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. I always thought quail were just these little birds,
Yeah.
like running around in fields and stuff.
And me too.
I had no idea that they had been domesticated for so long.
Yeah.
And, another thing that I found really surprising from the report
Yeah, that's...
is just how fast these birds grow.
Really?
So they're actually ready for market in just 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Wow.
I know, it's incredible.
That's really fast.
And they start laying eggs at 6 weeks.
Wow, so that really speaks to, like, the efficiency of quail farming.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, that rapid growth cycle is a huge factor.
And, speaking of efficiency,
Yeah.
the report highlights this fact,
Okay.
that you can actually raise 6 quails.
6 quails.
Yeah.
In the same amount of space
Wow.
as one chicken.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that just makes them...
That's a game changer for people with limited space.
Right, exactly.
Like you could have like urban rooftop quail coops.
I love that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but let's move on to like what makes these birds so appealing besides just their size. Like
Yeah.
Nutritionally. How do quail eggs compare to chicken eggs?
Well, they might be small,
Mm-hmm.
but they're packed with nutrients.
Oh, really?
So they have like this higher yolk to white ratio,
Okay.
which means they're richer in vitamins and minerals,
Wow.
and they're also lower in cholesterol than chicken eggs.
So they're kind of like a superfood egg.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
I've always been curious about the flavor of quail eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a noticeable difference?
They do have a slightly more intense flavor, I think, than chicken eggs.
Interesting.
It's still delicate,
Yeah.
but it's just like richer, I guess.
Okay.
Now, I'll admit.
I haven't had quail meat that often.
Okay.
What about it? Like, how does it taste?
So quail meat is known for its flavor.
Okay.
It's delicate and a little bit gamey.
Okay.
And the cool thing about it is it's super versatile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can roast it, you can grill it, you can use it in stews.
Wow.
There's so many options.
Yeah.
Like you can even make pickled quail
Hmm.
or like a tandoori quail.
Interesting.
The report even mentioned that it could be a ready-to-cook meat,
Oh, wow.
like pre-packaged chicken breasts.
So that's a really convenient,
Okay.
healthy protein option.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the birds themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the actual farms?
Okay.
What does a typical quail farm even look like?
Well, according to the report, there are two main systems
Huh?
for raising quail.
Okay.
There's the deep litter system.
Deep litter.
Yeah, and then there's battery cages.
Okay, so what's the deep litter system?
It's kind of like a free-range chicken setup where the birds have more space to roam around on the floor.
Got it.
And then battery cages are those multi-tiered units
Okay.
that are more about like space efficiency.
So kind of like the stacked rows you see in commercial egg production.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
So it seems like there's that trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Like between giving the birds more space
Mhm.
and then maximizing production in a smaller area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's talk about their diet.
Okay.
What do these birds eat to fuel all that growth and egg production?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because their diet actually includes fish meal.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so it's kind of surprising, but it shows how efficiently they convert feed into protein.
Makes sense.
And the report even mentions
Yeah.
that a 5-week-old quail can consume a surprising amount of feed for its size.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot for such a tiny bird.
Yeah.
Speaking of eggs, how many eggs can a single quail lay in a year.
So female quails are really productive. They can actually lay up to 250 eggs per year.
250.
Wow. Yeah, and they usually reach like 50% egg production by week 8.
That's incredible.
And they tend to lay their eggs in the evening.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So if you had a farm with like 500 laying quails,
Mm-hmm.
that's a massive number of potential chicks each week.
It is.
So let's talk about breeding and incubation.
Okay.
How does that work with quails?
So breeding is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
The ideal ratio is 1 male for every 5 females.
Okay.
And then once the eggs are laid, they require about an 18-day incubation period.
So tell me about the eggs.
Yeah.
They're those little speckled ones, right?
Yes, exactly.
They're adorable.
They're like a fraction the size of a chicken egg.
Yeah.
And they have this beautiful like speckled pattern on their shell.
I love those.
And the color can range from like white to brown.
Cool.
So you've got these tiny eggs hatching into rapidly growing chicks.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the meat yield? Like how much edible meat can you actually get from a single quail?
So this is where the efficiency of quail really shines.
Right.
You actually get a really high amount of edible meat from a quail.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like way more than you'd think.
Interesting.
The report says a healthy quail yields 70 to 73% of its body weight in dressed meat.
Wow.
To put that in perspective,
Yeah.
a 140-gram quail can provide about 100 grams of edible meat.
That's incredible.
I know, right?
So before we wrap up this first part, I
There's
want to touch on the health aspects of quail farming.
Yeah.
So are there any specific health challenges that farmers need to be aware of?
Well, the report really emphasizes the importance of proper nutrition
Okay.
for the breeder birds.
Got it.
Because if the parents are deficient in certain vitamins,
Yeah,
the chicks can actually develop weak legs.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like any animal,
Yeah.
a balanced diet is super important.
Absolutely.
What about diseases? Are quails susceptible to the same illnesses as chickens?
So actually, quails are generally more resistant to infectious diseases than chickens are.
Really?
Yeah, and that means they often don't require routine vaccinations,
Okay.
which makes things a little easier for the farmers.
Yeah, that's a big plus.
And it could also be better for consumers, right?
Yeah. I could see how some people would prefer less intervention in their food.
Right.
So that's definitely a point in favor of quail farming.
Yeah, but are there any downsides? The challenges that come with raising these birds?
Well, one potential challenge is the noise level.
The noise.
Yeah, specifically the male quails.
Oh, really?
They can be pretty noisy.
So maybe not the ideal backyard pet for everyone.
Right.
Are there any other potential issues to watch out for?
Another concern is pecking behavior.
Pecking.
Yeah, especially when males and females are housed together.
Okay.
It's going to lead to injuries and stress for the birds.
I see.
But careful management and like proper housing can help to minimize that.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to be aware of.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
There are some challenges to consider.
Yeah, but this has been a really fascinating look at the world of quail farming.
I agree.
I've learned so much already.
Me too. It's incredible how much potential these little birds have.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Like their history, their
Yeah.
growth, the nutrition, the sustainability.
Yeah, and even the challenges.
It's all very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So are we ready to move on to part 2?
I think so. Let's dive deeper into the economics of quail farming next.
Sounds good.
I'm really curious to see if you can actually make a profit raising these birds.
Yeah, that's a great question.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we've uncovered all these incredible facts about quail,
Yeah.
but now I'm curious about the business side of things.
Okay.
Like, can you actually make money
Right.
raising these little birds?
Yeah, that's the big question.
What are the economics of quail farming?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
And while this 2014 report
Yeah.
doesn't like dive into like the nitty-gritty financials,
Okay.
it does highlight some key factors
Okay.
that can make quail farming profitable.
So what are those factors?
Well, one of the big ones is their rapid growth cycle.
Right? We talked about that.
Yeah. They're ready for market in just 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge advantage
Mm-hmm.
because it allows farmers to generate revenue much more quickly
Yeah.
compared to like chickens or other
Oh,
poultry.
the faster growth, faster profits,
I
right?
say.
Makes sense.
So what else contributes to their profit potential?
Yeah.
Well, their egg production rate
Right.
is another major factor.
250 eggs a year.
Yeah, up to 250 eggs per year per quail.
That's a lot of eggs.
It is, and those speckled eggs often fetch a premium price.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people love those things.
So it's not just quantity, it's also the value of
Like it's
those
for-
unique eggs.
Yep, and remember how we talked about space efficiency?
Yeah, 6 quails in the space of 1 chicken.
Right.
Exactly.
So that also plays a huge role in the economics of it.
Okay, how so?
Well, because you can raise so many more birds in a smaller space.
Mm-hmm.
Your overhead costs are lower.
That makes sense.
You don't need as much land.
Right.
You could even explore vertical farming setups.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, maximize your production without needing a ton of acreage.
And that's especially important in
Right.
urban areas or places where land is expensive.
Absolutely.
So we've got fast growth, high egg production,
Yep.
and space efficiency,
Uh-huh.
all pointing towards a profitable business.
It seems like it.
But what about demand?
Okay.
Is there actually a market
Right.
for quail meat and eggs?
So that's a crucial question.
Yeah.
And while demand can vary depending on where you are,
Okay.
there's definitely a growing interest.
Really?
Yeah, in alternative poultry options.
Oh, okay.
Like quail.
People are looking for something different.
Exactly. People want more diverse protein sources.
Mm.
And chefs are always looking for unique ingredients.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think there's definitely a market there.
Okay, so people are becoming more aware of where their food comes from
Right.
and how it's raised. So does quail farming align with those concerns?
Like sustainability and ethical practices.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And our research report doesn't really go in detail about that.
Okay.
But based on what we know about quail,
Yeah.
there are some things that suggest
Okay.
that they could be a more sustainable choice.
Than conventional poultry.
Yeah,
So let's
right.
break that down.
Okay.
What makes quail farming potentially more sustainable?
Well, their small size and efficient feed conversion ratio means they require fewer resources overall.
Okay.
They simply eat less than larger birds,
Right.
which means a smaller environmental footprint.
So less feed equals less impact on the environment.
Exactly.
Okay. What about their waste?
Quail manure.
Yeah. Is that a problem?
Actually, quail manure is a valuable resource.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can compost it
Okay.
and use it to enrich the soil.
So like a natural fertilizer.
Yeah, exactly. So you're reducing your reliance on synthetic fertilizers.
That's great.
Yeah, so their waste becomes an asset.
Instead of a problem.
Exactly.
And we talked about disease resistance.
Right.
Does that play a role in sustainability?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because quails are naturally resistant to so many diseases.
Yeah.
It means you don't need to use as many antibiotics,
Okay.
which is a big concern in conventional poultry farming.
Yeah, with antibiotic resistance and all that.
Exactly. So by reducing antibiotic use, quail farming could contribute to a healthier food system overall.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any other environmental benefits?
Well, think about their adaptability
Okay.
to different housing systems.
Like the vertical farming.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of these huge sprawling farms,
Yeah.
you could have more compact, multi-tiered quail farms.
And that would free up land for other uses. Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Especially in areas where land is limited.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a much more efficient use of resources.
Okay, so this is all very promising, but I also want to think about the birds themselves,
Okay.
like their welfare.
Right.
We talked about pecking behavior,
Yeah.
but are there any other concerns?
About how quails are treated on farms.
Yeah.
So that's a complex issue.
Okay.
And unfortunately, this research report
Yeah.
doesn't give us a lot of specifics about welfare practices,
Okay.
but we can still think critically
Yeah.
about potential concerns.
Based on what we know.
Right, exactly. So, for example, we know that battery cages
Yeah.
can restrict the bird's movement
Okay.
and prevent them from engaging in their natural behaviors.
Right, because they're confined to those small spaces.
Exactly.
So there's that trade-off again
Yeah.
between efficiency and animal welfare.
Right.
Does the deep litter system offer any advantages?
Potentially.
Oh, because the birds have more space to move around.
Right.
But even in deep litter systems,
Yeah.
there are other factors to consider,
Like what?
like how many birds are in one space,
Stuffing density?
right? And their access to food and water,
Yeah.
and just the overall management practices.
So it's not just the type of system, it's
Yeah.
how it's managed.
Exactly.
Are there any industry standards
Okay.
or certifications related to quail welfare?
So this research doesn't mention any specific certifications,
Okay.
but as consumers become more interested
Yeah.
in ethical sourcing,
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see more emphasis on welfare standards.
Yeah, that makes sense.
People want to know that the animals are being treated well,
Right.
and they're willing to pay for that.
So where does all this leave us?
Okay.
What's the future of quail farming?
What, based on what we've learned,
Yeah.
quail farming has a lot of potential.
Okay.
It could be a really sustainable and efficient alternative.
To conventional poultry.
Exactly.
So we've got resource efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
reduced environmental impact,
Yep.
and a unique product that's becoming more popular.
Exactly.
But we can't forget about the ethical considerations.
Right.
We have to make sure that the birds are treated humanely.
Absolutely. That's crucial.
It's about finding that balance between efficiency and profitability while still upholding ethical and sustainable practices.
It's about creating a system where everyone benefits.
The birds and the business.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
It's amazing to think about how these tiny birds, they have this rich history and so much potential.
Yeah, for the future of food.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fascinating.
It is, but I think it's also important to step back for a second and think about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What happens if quail farming really takes off?
Okay.
How would that affect the entire food system?
It's a great question. Yeah.
So, would it create more opportunities for smaller farms? Or would we see, big corporations taking over?
Right. That's kind of what we've seen with other food trends.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you have all this initial enthusiasm and diversification.
Yeah.
And then as demand grows, the big companies come in.
And that can change everything.
Yeah.
The prices, consumer access, even the environmental impact.
Yeah. A small local quail farm
Right.
is going to have a much different footprint than a huge industrial operation.
Exactly.
And it's interesting to think about the cultural side of food, too.
Yeah.
How would a change in quail consumption affect traditions and cuisine?
Yeah, because in some cultures,
Right.
quail eggs and meat are already really common.
Yeah.
But in other places, they're not really known.
Right.
So introducing these new foods can be exciting.
Yeah.
But we also have to be mindful of those existing traditions and the importance they have in different communities.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance
Right.
between embracing new things and respecting what's already there.
Exactly.
And what about the existing poultry industry?
Okay.
If quail farming becomes more popular, what happens to chicken farmers?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Would it be competition? Or could there be some kind of collaboration?
Yeah.
Could they diversify?
Yeah, it makes you realize that food is about so much more than just what's on our plate.
Yeah, it's connected to so many things.
It's these interconnected systems, cultural values, livelihoods.
Absolutely.
It's really fascinating.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening.
I agree.
We started with this research paper just about quail farming.
Yeah.
But it sparked all these bigger discussions.
About sustainability, ethics, economics, culture.
It's amazing how much one topic can connect to.
It really is.
And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Yeah, getting people to think critically and understand the world better.
Exactly.
So for our listeners, we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
Could quail farming, with all its potential benefits, actually contribute to a more sustainable and equitable food future?
That's the question.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of factors to consider to make sure it works for everyone.
The producers, the consumers, the birds.
Exactly.
Well, we hope you'll keep exploring these questions.
Yeah, keep diving deeper.
And see where your own journey takes you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.